So welcome everybody. This is the British Interplanetary Society, the West Midlands branch. Today we've got a talk by Matt Irvine. So in a sec we'll have Matt Irvine. I think you all know who Matt Irvine is, given how fast you all registered for this talk. I think we all know Matt. After it, we'll have some questions and answers, which I will moderate. So if you want to ask a question, what to do is put your question in the chat, and then I'll go through it. I can go through it in sequential order, and if we've got time, I'll ask you to come on video and ask it in person. Some other events in June, we've got Alistair John talking about his Race to Space, his educational programme about defining the next generation for the space industry. From the 14th of June at the think tank in Birmingham, Birmingham Science Museum, there's going to be a human spaceflight exhibition. So I think we might make a trip to go up there. If not, I'm definitely going up on my own. Special interest branches. There's going to be more on that today. So after the Q&A, we've got Robin Brand and Sarah Henley, and they're going to say just some brief words of introduction about what that's about and how we can get involved. And BIS memberships. So about a third of you here today are not members, and let me tell you, you are missing out. There's absolutely tons of videos in the members area. You get Spaceflight Magazine or JBIS Space Chronicle, or all three if you want. We have a newsletter. We've got there's members area on the website, all sorts of things. Projects, historical archive. If you're researching any books or anything like that, this is where you want to be. And so I can thoroughly recommend it. When I joined, I never looked back and started binge watching all those videos. So let me just stop sharing. So I think that's the end of those. And I'm not going to introduce Matt because I think we all know who Matt is. And instead, I'm just going to hand straight over to Matt. Matt, over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Bobby. I'm not quite sure who I am, but anyway, yes, if you don't know who I am, you probably joined the wrong meeting. Look at my website, mattirvine.com. It tells you vaguely about me, but just very, very briefly, I was BBC for 25 years or so, mostly in special effects department, visual effects, doing the usual Doctor Who Blake 7, Blu-ray season 1 just out. We've redone all the model shots, and also did a lot of science program, factual science. Toronto Horizon, QED, if anyone remembers QED, Sky at Night, Patrick, and then later Stargazing Live. So that's very, very briefly. I've always had a fascination, really, with, frankly, where it all went wrong. Or not, perhaps that's the wrong way of actually putting it, but that's why I've called this talk, and I will now run my screen share, which you've got to put the glasses on to make sure, where is it? It's down there. Share. Let me start my press, so it's full screen. Right, it's full screen. So that should be there. Share. Right. And you should now be getting a blue screen, a blue background with the BIS logo and West Midlands. Somebody say, yes, they've got that.
Yes.
Yes, you have. Right, good, splendid. Right. I start this way. Oops, get on the right. That's it, right. I think we're all going to be familiar with this picture. It isn't because of Armstrong, it's Aldrin. In fact, Armstrong isn't the picture, he's reflected, but he's the only one who had the camera on the Apollo 11 flight. They had two cameras after that, so they could both take pictures. There is a rumour, probably well-founded, that actually Aldrin, Buzz grabbed the camera at one point off of Neil, and actually there is a picture of Neil, but because they hadn't got the red stripes on the suits, which were coming in on 13 because that didn't land, so 14 was the first one. So you could tell the commander because it had the red bands around the legs and arms. You couldn't tell which was which, and apparently Buzz and Neil didn't know which was which either. Right, okay. So we are familiar with that, and I think you'll be familiar with this.
I believe the nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Right, I assume you got the sound on that. Interestingly, just as a side issue, when I got that piece of film or bit on tape out of the BBC Library when I was directing, it was out of sync, about 4 frames out, so we put it back to curve. Right, there was that magnificent statement and a magnificent project. But was it the right one? Hence my question mark. And hence why I call this talk because maybe that wasn't the right way to go. Magnificent achievement though it was, maybe Apollo wasn't. You can see why Kennedy made it. You can see why all the American aerospace companies, of which there were dozens at that point. I think there's 2 now. It's called Boeing and Lockheed Martin, and that's it. And they've all taken over all the others while they're rubbing their hands with glee. And of course, they did it. They did it within the end of the decade with a year to spare. So we got familiar with pictures like this of the Saturn V on its core transporter and launch tower, moving from the VAB, which is the building, the very big building, as you probably all know, on the left, going out the crawlerway out to the launch pads at Cape Canaveral, Cape Kennedy, back to Cape Canaveral, Kennedy Space Center, Merritt Island, let's call it that. Right, where they launch the rockets. We're familiar with that. Now, that was 1969 or to 1972, and talking of Saturn rockets, it went through to the last Saturn 1B to be launched, which was Apollo-Soyuz. That was 75, and that's now 50 years ago, the anniversary, 50th anniversary coming up this year. Nothing since. It took some time even for can't say unmanned these days, uncrewed launchers to be launched, and it wasn't just American, there's been Chinese, European and whatever on the moon. The Americans have eventually got around to it, and even this is now going to be fraught with problems with this. Artemis, follow on to Apollo. You know your Greek mythology, you know why it's called Artemis. It's basically a combination of Apollo and the shuttle. The capsule isn't an Apollo capsule, the Orion, but it's the same difference. The boosters and the liquid fuel or external tanks are basically shuttle. The engines are shuttle, although in a backward move, whereas the shuttle engines, the 3 of them, the SSMEs, were recoverable, the 4 of them on Artemis aren't recoverable. Do the math that our American cousins usually don't say. But Artemis 1 did get launched, uncrewed. It did have a crew. It had a crew of Shaun the Sheep and Snoopy. That's right, as a weightlessness or 0G indicators. So we were represented as well from the European point of view, as well as Snoopy. The rocket took off. A few things were not quite right with it, but it worked fine for what it was. Splashed down and whatever. And of course, then the next aim is for Artemis 2 and 3, and they're the only ones that are actually scheduled at the moment for the moon. The first Artemis 2, which will be crewed, will do what Apollo 8 did in 69. I mean, go think how far back that is. I'm sure a lot of you weren't even born then. That will repeat that, and that probably won't be to 26 now. And Artemis 3 is designed as a lander, but a lot of that is in doubt at the moment. But anyway, with the, not getting into politics, but with let's say the new government in the US at the moment has put kibosh on a lot of things. But anyway, let's hope we do get 2 and 3 off the ground. After that, frankly, who knows? This wasn't new to this gentleman, Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, the Russian theoretician and school teacher who proposed a lot of what has now come to pass. I mean, he was aware of liquid-fueled rockets, he was aware of space stations and all that sort of thing. But he was a theoretician only. He didn't build anything, or rather. He did design a lot, drawings of his rocket, another one there with crew on board, and there's a model of it in Kaluga in Russia, in his hometown, where there is a museum, unfortunately one place I haven't yet been, which shows the internal structure. You can see it was actually quite large. He didn't build anything. The person who did, particularly as far as liquid fuel rockets, was of course this gentleman, Robert Hutchins Goddard. Unfortunately, well, Tsiolkovsky was working in secrecy, mainly because it was late 18th, early 19th century, late 19th, early 20th century, and, you know, pre-internet, let's put it that way. Goddard also, it wasn't a case he was hiding from publicity, he didn't court it. Even they had Charles Lindbergh on board, but it didn't really get out. If there'd been the internet, yes, it would have done, you know, be on social media, but it didn't. So people didn't really know what he was actually doing. He, of course, launched the world's first liquid-fueled rocket, as against solid fuel, March 26, 1926, in Auburn, Massachusetts. This is a photograph taken at the time with the rocket. The rocket itself is the bit in the centre there. The bit that Goddard's holding onto is actually the frame to hold it. He interestingly worked the other way round. It was a bit like front-wheel drive cars. You've got to pull the rocket into the air, therefore the engine's got to be at the top. No, you haven't. He later learned you didn't have to do that. But here, the bit at the top, the pointy bit at the top with the rocket nozzle, that is the actual rocket and the nozzle, and then the fuel goes up the lines. You can see the side from the tanks down below at the bottom. This actually did work. It didn't fly very, very far. It flew and landed in Aunt Effie's cabbage patch, having gone up about, don't quote me on this, something like 110 feet or something or other. It was pre-metric at that point. He didn't actually do many rockets. He did 4 actually from Auburn. He was a teacher at Clark University, which is in Auburn, or a professor there. So, but the neighbours started complaining. As I suppose if you get a rocket landing in your cabbage patch, you would do. That actual launch site is memorialised at Auburn and the local golf course, and I have actually been to that one. There's me leaning on it, treading on the daffodils. By the looks of it, I probably shouldn't be doing that. Missiles are still launched there, but because they're going mainly horizontally now, not vertically. Instead, Goddard, who's in the centre of this picture, moved down south to New Mexico with a group of close colleagues there. I think one of them is his actually brother-in-law. Don't ask me which one it is at the moment, but there he continued to build the rockets. He used to build them in his workshop at a rented farmhouse, and he used to transport them in this Model T Ford, as you can see the rocket on the back, which he nicknamed the hearse because it was black and it was like a van. There he built bigger and bigger rockets, liquid fueled, of course, so you can see the tanks there. And that was probably the biggest structure that he built on this site in Roswell. And you'll notice at the top there, it is Roswell. There we are, that's a larger version of it, 1935, Roswell. And you probably associate that with something else. And actually, if you want another talk from me, I've got a talk called Robert versus the Flying Saucers, but for another time. Because yes, Roswell was a place where supposedly something landed in 1947. But having been all around there, like I said, it's part of the other talk. Believe of it what you will. But anyway, that's where Goddard ended up in the 1930s. That's basically it's all left of the site. There's me sitting on the rock, which was put there by the Daughters of the Revolution, or whatever the organisation's called, some relatively recently, actually. It's in the middle of a field. Well, as you can see in the bottom picture just there. Yes, it's a big field. And full of cows at the moment. But I looked around, there's absolutely no sign of anything left, but we are going back to the 1930s, and that was taken probably about 5 or 6 years ago. His workshop was recreated in the Arts Museum in Roswell. In fact, at one end of Roswell, you've got the Arts Museum, which includes this workshop and arty things. At the other end, you've got the UFO Museum in a converted cinema. So they're half a mile apart. I've actually done the journey. I actually stuck the GoPro on the side of the rental car. This is how close these two museums are together. So you can cover both things in one journey to Roswell.